Okay. Good morning. We'll finish up talking about multicultural Korea. And from the looks of it, the class will not last for, I think everything will be covered in about 50 minutes, I would say. So we'll have a not full class. Okay? In terms of time, that is. Okay, that's the title of this week's topic. And so on Monday, well, we covered up to theories of global migration, and like to emphasize again, a society becomes multicultural because people move, right? That's why theories of globalization, theories of global migration is something that you should really be familiar with, okay? Like why people get to move. And in today's class, I'll talk about 3 factors that make Korea multicultural, and so the first would be influx of migrant workers, second, influx of migrant brides, and third, rise in the number of multicultural children. Okay? And very briefly, I'll talk about the implications of the Korean case. 이게 안 되네. 아니요, 그냥. 아니, 내 걸로 할게요. Okay, so as you may recall, I talked about how Korea, before becoming a migrant receiving country, Korea used to be a migrant sending country, right? So that's a reminder. But the focus today would be definitely how and why Korea became a migrant receiving country. So that happened in earnest from the mid-1990s, okay? And that's because small to mid-sized manufacturing firms could not find Korean workers. So until today, even to this day, we don't have a labor shortage problem. Okay, yes, Korea is rapidly aging, and Korea will actually suffer from labor shortage in the next decade or so. But now we don't have a labor shortage problem. Problem we have is this. Young people who are better educated, wealthier, and status conscious simply shun away from factory jobs at small to mid-sized firms. And any theory, what theory did we talk about that fits this situation? Does anybody remember? Remember the 5 theories I talked about on Monday? Yes. Yes, thank you. Dual labor market theory, right? And this happened, right? In addition to this, another situation was this. Small to mid-sized firms, instead of trying everything to make their work more attractive, like offering higher wages, better working conditions, long paid leave like holidays and so on, it simply said, look, to the government, that is, right? Again, these small to mid-sized firms had a choice of either making their work more attractive to recruit Korean workers, or simply look outside. Why? because importing foreign labor was in the beginning, I'm talking about like 20 years ago, was much cheaper than hiring Korean workers to begin with. And what theory does this fit, this situation? It's the historical structural approach, right? How capitalism utilizes cheap labor for greater profit, right? So, so the two theories already explain how Korea has brought in, or why Korean firms brought in migrant workers, right? And these unskilled migrant workers are typically employed in construction, auto parts, textiles. So all these industries, they cannot function without all these foreign workers, okay? Well, at least now, again, in the beginning, 20, 30 years ago, these foreign workers were paid not even half of Korean workers, okay? They were brought in as industrial trainees. Now, labor laws have changed where they are entitled to the same labor standards and benefits, okay? So they, earn as much as other Koreans, okay? Anyway, and where are they from? They're typically from China, including Korean Chinese, and Indonesia, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and the Philippines. Because for these workers from these countries, the wages they could earn in Korea is about at least 5 times what they earn back home. So that's why they want to work in a more developed country in Asia, like Korea, Japan, Taiwan. Those 3 countries are the most favored destinations for these workers seeking higher pay for their work. The number of migrant workers in Korea is expected to increase in the future, as we talked about last week, as the rapid aging of the population will lead to a sharp decline in the economically active population. That is, if Korea wants to sustain its current economic growth, it will need to bring in more foreign workers. Okay? So I just have one sort of graph or figure to show you as to why Korea has to bring in migrant workers. So you can see how, okay, so there it is. So the age group that matters the most for Korea's economy is the pink shaded block, right? And as you can see, at its height, we reached like 73% of the total population comprised those 15 to 64-year-olds, because they are considered economically active population. But from this point on, there's gradual decline, right? So that's very short, but that's all I have to say about how, again, Korea has become multicultural because of the influx of migrant workers, and I explained that through a couple of theories, right, of global migration. Next, this is more complex, and more issue-oriented, and that's the increase in the immigration of brides. And some words we use to sort of refer to international marriage are internet marriage, mail order brides, bogus marriages, and the selling of sex for visas. These are all derogatory phrases that people have used to refer to international marriage migration. And many sensationalist accounts accuse marriage migrants of abusing migration policies through fake marriages, while other reports portray women marriage migrants as victims of human trafficking. So, because the victims of abuse of these migrant brides have been reported almost on a regular basis in the Korean news. And study shows that they are vulnerable to more victimization. I'm talking about domestic violence, right? Than average Korean women, okay? So that's an issue that is getting more attention. So such depictions of marriage as a 이거 어떻게 없애요? 아니면 아래로? Such depictions of marriage as a commercialized and arranged process fuels stereotypes of Asian women as commodities. Such stereotypes are somewhat warranted because a large majority of marriages between Korean women, typo there, Korean men and women from other Asian countries took place through international matchmaking agencies. So one study shows that at least with Vietnamese women who have married Korean men, 70% of these women from Vietnam are found to have married Korean men through international matchmaking agency. Okay, and after I go through what I have, you'll understand why the whole international marriage is mired in controversy. Okay. The rise in international marriage has been on the rise because for decades there has been a gender imbalance in rural parts of Korea. Young women often head to cities for jobs and marriage, while their male counterparts stay behind to tend their land and fulfill the Confucian expectation that they look after their elderly parents. So this is when many men started to look outside for marriage. And in the 1980s, can you believe this? Local governments started subsidizing private marriage brokers who could introduce bachelor farmers to ethnically Korean women in China, paying the brokers 4 to 6 million won per marriage. Okay? It was an attempt to address the aging population by encouraging men to find a wife and hopefully have children. In the decades after, brides were no longer only ethnically Korean and began coming from more countries, including the Philippines, Vietnam, and Cambodia. An industry of transnational marriage brokers soon emerged. As of May 2020, there were close to 400 matchmaking agencies registered in Korea. Okay? And many municipalities used to, and some still do, offer subsidies ranging from 3 million won to 10 million won for men for marrying a foreign wife. Believe it or not. For example, as of August 2019, Yangpyeong in Gyeonggi province offered men older than 35 who have never been previously married a 10 million won subsidy for marrying a foreign wife and presenting a marriage registration. Yes? No, just any foreigner from outside of Korea. Not if, so this will not apply if you were to find your foreign wife in Korea. So it has to be for a man who goes abroad to find a wife. And when I show you this, you'll be sort of heartbroken to realize how this is a whole, like a business process. Okay, here it is. The brokers recruit bachelors and take them in groups to overseas countries and hold events in which each man meets groups of women, often in the form of 1 versus 25 event. So men would be sitting in a chair and there would be like 25 women coming in, and he would write down like numbers, right? Because there are more women to see. So he would sort of make a short list and then finally choose the person he likes. And at least in the past, the picked woman usually went along. Typically did not say no to that. And men are promised that they will meet an unlimited number of women until they find the ones they like. To get the service of an international matchmaking agency, Korean men have to pay a fee, which often ranges from $10,000 to $15,000 for a consummated marriage. Once a match is made, a couple goes through the whole process of dating to wedding within the 6 or 7 days. Okay? So here we go. They go on dating for a day or two, meet future parents-in-law, hold wedding, honeymoon for a day or two, return to Korea. Okay? So the phrase bridal shopping is not an exaggeration in a way, right? And this is not unique to Korea, of course. This happened with Japanese men, like farmers in Japan. Same thing with Taiwanese. And also in the West, when they go, I won't name countries, but I think Russia was such a destination, right? Where American men and men from the UK, right, would go to that country to meet future wives, right? Yes. Again, we cannot really make generalizations about governments providing subsidies because there's some, right? Not all. And well, I think there is a kind of a stigma attached to this because, if you are if you have a good job and if you are wealthy enough, I think this is people's stereotype, right? That you would not turn to outside source, right, to find a foreign wife. So I think when a man is seen with a woman from another Asian country, I think we would, Koreans stereotypically would think that they are not that well off. Okay, so the status, socioeconomic status, is associated with this particular type of marriage. And this kind of ad is banned now. You can't put this kind of ad on the street. But until a few years ago, not in Seoul, but in the countryside, small cities, this was a very popular form of advertisement. Okay, and for those of you who cannot read Korean, I'll sort of translate for you. So this says, tour to marry Vietnamese women. Okay, get married, date, 6 nights, 7 nights, 1 million won. So this is not for consummating marriage, but just to set the whole thing up, right? And this one, first time marriage, remarriage, physically handicapped, old men get married to Vietnamese ladies. And you're the star of your own happiness. Get married to a Vietnamese woman, a Filipino woman, and they'll never run away, kind of, right? Some extreme cases, but again, so that's why feminists in Korea were abhorred with those kinds of, again, I mean, the posters at least made look like that these women were commodities, right? So that's why they were banned, thankfully. Not all intermarriages involving Korean men and foreign women take this form, of course, but what all of this indicates is the rise in the number of migrant brides. The proportion of intermarriages in total marriages in Korea has increased significantly since 1990, soaring to about 7 to 10% of all marriages in the last 10 years. So you can see how back in 1990, the international marriage accounted for only 1.2%. But you can see how I think this is 2010. That's our record. A whopping 13.5% of all marriages comprised international marriages. Okay, but since then it fell, and it's anywhere between 7 to 10% of all marriages happen to comprise of international marriages. Okay, meaning marriage between Korean person and a foreign spouse. Okay. As for the nationalities of foreign wives, they largely comprise of other Asians. And I'll give you a pie graph. So the largest proportion of foreign wives come from Vietnam, followed by China, and this includes Korean Chinese. Okay? Thailand, this is a surprise, right? Japan, Americans, there's a typo there, Philippines, and so on. And that's another surprise, I guess, Russia. As for foreign husbands, just for comparison, right? considerable proportion comprises of those from the economically advanced nations. Here, number one is China, but right behind is the USA. Number two, as far as the proportion of foreign husbands is concerned, followed by Vietnam, Canada, UK, Japan, and so on. Okay? Like labor importation, bride importation until now has not been due to shortage of brides. Again, we don't have shortage of brides yet. But the international marriage has been due to, again, not bride shortage, but Korean women's aversion to both marrying low-income men, especially farmers, fishermen, and factory workers, because their typical income is lower than the national average, or men living in urban areas. Second, they just don't like to live in the countryside. You know, they left the countryside, or you know, if you ask a typical Korean, I don't think you will find too many people saying, "Oh, one day I want to go live in the countryside." Okay, I think we're very urban oriented. Okay, so that's why Korean men living in the countryside could not find Korean wives. That's why we had to bring in migrant brides, right? And the point I'm trying to make is this. If you think that, you know, like 10% of marriages comprising of international marriages is high, it's gonna get much higher. Why? This. Shortage of brides is expected to happen over the next 2 decades or so because millions of female fetuses are believed to have been aborted from the early 1970s to the early 2000s. Okay? This is a fact. And how do we know that so many female fetuses were aborted? Can anybody take a guess? Okay, well, Korea no longer has son preference, okay? And I could tell you a little bit later with data, okay? So Korea's data are the same as, let's say, the USA, okay? And well, abortion in Korea has been decriminalized, effective 2021, but it's been illegal until 2021. Okay? Yet, abortion was widely practiced, and maybe I'm saying too much without, you know, you getting the information you want, right? How do we know that all these abortions took place? And well, here we go. You know what sex ratio at birth is? Okay, sex ratio is always male versus female, whatever, right? But sex ratio at birth looks at this. It's the number of male birth per 100 female birth. Not every sex ratio looks at numbers like this, but at least with sex ratio at birth, it's number of females per 100 female birth. Do you think this will be a good item for the final exam? I think so. So memorize this, okay? Because some things you just have to memorize, okay? Number of male birth per 100 female birth. Now you're getting the picture as to how we found out that there were massive sex-selective abortions, okay? And
What is the natural sex ratio at birth? Believe it or not, well, just for fun, do you think more females are born or more males are born? Females. Incorrect. Without human intervention, that is abortions, the natural sex ratio at birth is about 105 males born for every female, 100 females. And you have to wonder why does this happen, right? And so again, keep that in mind, 105, okay? So you sometimes say 106, right? But just for simplicity, 105, right? And this is the sex ratio at birth in Korea in selected years. And you can see how this is 2022, I think. So it looks good, right? No sex-selective abortion, right? The number indicates. What about here? There, whopping 116.9. So for all these years, for every 100 female birth, there were extra males born because of sex-selective abortions. Okay? You got that now? All right? And just for fun, why are more males born naturally? Here are the reasons. Did you want to answer? You know what equilibrium is? I'm not referring to the movie. Equilibrium is in colloquial term balance. You know, you've heard this before, right? Nature always finds a way to restore or keep balance, right? And this is the beauty of Homo sapiens, because more males are born because of this. In comparison to girls and female youth, boys and male youth are more risk-taking, more aggressive, and engage more in extreme sports and activities, all of which lead to the latter's higher rates of death from accidents, homicides, and even suicides. So by the time males and females reach their reproductive age, let's say 15, it becomes equal. Isn't this amazing? That's the beauty of nature taking care of itself, okay? Or maintaining the state of equilibrium, okay? Males also have a higher infant mortality rate and are more vulnerable to death from practically all types of disease, okay? So other than female-specific disease, again, males more vulnerable, okay? So that's why you put all of these together. By the time they reach age 15, let's say, it'll be like 99, sort of, right? Ultimately, sex ratio evens out, hence reaching equilibrium. Okay? So what all of this shows from the graph I showed you is that the number of extra males has been accumulating for more than 4 decades in Korea, from 1910 to 1970 to 2015. Can you guess what medical technology was mobilized for selective abortions? Well, you're too young to know. Ultrasound. That technology was invented in the 1950s in the USA, but it became massively popular in Asia starting from the 1970s. Okay, that's why That technology was used in Korea. Where else? China, Taiwan, India. All the countries which had strong sun preference. Okay? Strong sun preference still prevalent in India. I don't know about China. Okay? But Japan never had that problem. Okay? But Confucian society like Korea definitely had a very strong sun preference. Okay? And so, just for fun, the sex ratio at birth for the family's third and fourth born children are much higher. Okay, although this is from like 1992. Can you see the number here? 1990. For the fourth child in the family, sex ratio was, what's the normal number? 105. So you can see, this is just amazing number, right? You don't want to be a fetus as a fourth child in the family back then, right? So the reason I have this is this to show you that we finally do not have any sun preference. You can see how the yellow line is the overall sex ratio at birth, and the dark line is the sex ratio of birth for third and additional birth, right? So you can see how as late as the as late as 2020, right? Well, this is in the range of being normal, right? So as late as the 2011, we had sort of slight sun preference, right? Because again, it's higher than 105. So, so this is slightly abnormal, right? So, you know, if you want to be very strict, I think from last year for sure, okay, we don't have sun preference, okay? Even if Korean families with 3 or 4 girls, they would not have an abortion. That's what this particular data indicate. As a consequence, Korea is expected to face a serious marriage squeeze, that is, shortage of brides, starting in the next few years. Okay? In the next 2 decades and longer, therefore, the actual shortage of women will be the reason why intermarriages will increase in Korea. That means more foreign women being brought in. Okay? Okay, that's the end of the 5th section. Any question before I move on to the next section? Yes. No such action from the Korean government which changed the way Koreans sort of perceive sort of descendants. I think it simply was a matter of changing value. Okay, so like if they, you know how Korea's fertility rate is like 0.78, right? So many couples are having just one child voluntarily, and they realize how raising a girl is more fun than a boy, and also girls are nicer to their parents. And you know, when they're fully grown up, no, this is something we openly talk about. The daughters are always more caring and nicer to their parents when they get older. That's a very general knowledge. Okay, so Koreans' perception changed because they're very practical, right? And personally, I'm the youngest in my family. I have 4 brothers and 1 sister, and each brother and sister had like nieces and nephews, but never mixed. Meaning, my oldest brother has 2 sons. Second brother, second oldest, three daughters. Third oldest, two sons. So you can see how there was never a brother with a daughter and son mixed together, right? And I've seen how they grew up. And my brothers, who only had sons, they were living in hell. Because sons, wow, when the 2 are put together, it's a war. But when I observed my sister and my brother with only daughters, always laughter. I mean, there could be some, bickering and all that, but much softer, much, kind and so on, right? I'm making generalizations, but I think it's not too far off, okay? Again, when I see, because of that experience, when I see a woman walking down with like 2 sons or 3 sons, I go, wow. I just feel so sorry for the woman. Because of, again, my personal observation of my nephews. Anyway, moving on to the next section, multicultural reality in Korea 3, multicultural children. Due to the increase in intermarriages, there has been a steady rise in the number of multicultural children, that is biracial or bi-ethnic children. According to the National Statistical Office, there were, as of 2021, more than 384,000 multicultural children in Korea, representing about 0.7% of the total population, but again, rising, right? Proportion of multicultural children by nationality of their parent. Number 1, China, Korean Chinese, Vietnam, China itself. This one I can never understand. How could there be so many more female children than male children? Shouldn't it be like 55, 50, or 45, something like that? But anyway, I couldn't find any reason why this was so. Okay? So, the numbers here are the actual number of birth of multicultural children. So as of 2020, over 16,000, right, were multicultural children, representing about 6% of all birth. Okay, I'm sure that's what it is. Yes. Same thing. Anyway, let's move on to the last section, and that's the implications of the Korean case on broader debate in racial and ethnic relations. First, as in the West, low-wage service jobs will largely become the domain of migrant workers in Korea. Already, if you visit many restaurants, I don't know if you noticed, but many waitresses are from outside of Korea. Okay, and you may not notice because they are like Korean Chinese, and they also speak Korean with a slight accent. Okay, but soon, who knows, right? Like in the West, cashiers, maintenance workers, taxi drivers, you know, being occupied by largely foreigners. So again, this may happen. Second, the current case points to a new trend that can be called the regionalization of international migration. So if you look at the migrant workers and migrant brides who are in Korea and also international students, large majority of them are from other parts of Asia. Okay? So that represents what I call regionalization of international migration or global migration. And it's happening because of you know, geographical proximity, cultural similarities, and also some Asian countries have rapidly developed economically, right? I'm talking about Japan, Korea, Taiwan. Third, the Korean case reminds us that research on race and ethnicity needs to focus more on the latter as a social problem. You know, let me brag a little about myself. When I was a grad student, I actually came up with this idea, ethnicism. Okay? Well, that's different from racism because you know how racism is this sort of a stereotypical view of different race based on physical characteristics, right? Now, falsely, of course, ethnicism would be something similar, thinking that Koreans are different this way or that way, or the Japanese are this or that way, right? Which are all false. Okay, we construct those stereotypes, right? Anyway, since then, someone has published an article with the same ideas, so I missed it. Because if I were the first to write a paper on it, forever, anybody writing something on this would be like Andrew Kim said this and that in 1999 or whatever. The last point is the racism in Korea. According to the World Survey conducted in 2013, 34.1% of Koreans said they would not want people of another race as their neighbors. So just looking at, you know, Korea's number does not give you a full picture, right? And so the survey asked participants in more than 80 countries, okay? 80 countries. And here are the results. Key findings of the survey. Countries in the Middle East and Asia were found to be the least racially tolerant. Don't you find this interesting? Because they are not ethnically homogeneous. And yet, anyway, Latin and Anglo countries were the most racially tolerant. Jordan and India were the least racially tolerant. And again, this is also very interesting because, especially India, right? Multicultural society and yet racially intolerant. France was the least racially tolerant country in Europe. So here are some figures. Remember Korea, 34%, right? But in countries like the US, Canada, only, you know, between 0 to 5% said they don't want foreign, what was the question? Foreigner? Person of a different race to be their neighbor, right? Let me see. Yes, people of another race. as their neighbor. And so the top part, most tolerant, followed by Mexico, Germany, and so on, where 5 to like 10% of the respondents said they would not want a person of another race as their neighbor. And the next sort of a bracket is 10 to 15%, Finland, Italy, Czech. And there's that 15 to 19% or 20. And the least racially tolerant countries go like this. 20 to 29.9%, there's a France, Malaysia, and this is where South Korea belongs, okay? Along with Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Vietnam. And also Indonesia is a surprise because Indonesia also has, I think, hundreds of ethnic groups. So there's India and Jordan being the most racially intolerant countries in terms of that particular oral value survey. Okay? Well, this is a survey done in Korea asking foreigners whether they experienced any act of racism or discrimination. And one thing I can tell you is this: we still don't have a law, or should I say, we still don't have any anti-discrimination laws on the basis of race or nationality or ethnic group. Okay? Although we have laws against discrimination based on gender, disability, and age, but not for discrimination based on race, ethnicity, or nationality. So we have a long way to go in making Korea more hospitable to multicultural reality. Okay? Before I let you go, is there anyone who experienced any form of discrimination in Korea? Or everyone would be like, yeah. Anyone? Or you're just too shy, or you don't want to offend any Korean by saying what you have to say? All right. Thank you, and I'll see you next week.